And we understand there are many of you who feel very alarmed about what you see in the world, but we would always encourage you, if you are only alarmed at what you see in the world, you are not paying enough attention to the world at large. You are focusing in on certain areas that perhaps you are even being encouraged to focus on. You are missing the bigger picture. Spirit is alive, consciousness is alive, love is alive. Focus on those things as well as those areas you may be working on behalf of the improvement of, and you will have a more balanced life. You will have more conscious ideas around how to be the revolution, and you will also be balancing yourself, this new human soul that you are becoming. You are not here to be enslaved to suffering, just as you are not here to allow the enslavement of humanity to continue.
What's up, Soul Fam? Welcome back on the Just Happen podcast. It's been a while since we got in here face to face, eye to eye, but I feel there's some important things that need to be said. And before that, if you're new here, welcome. It's so nice to meet you. My name is Emilio. And on this channel, we explore the deep mysticism, mysteries, and the new consciousness that is arising on the planet. So this is a movement that is affecting every single human being, and we are elevating to a new state, a new consciousness. And the people that come on this show are the pioneers, the way showers that will guide you, that will give you that sustenance, that grounding energy to be able to carry out into the new earth. So with that said, there has to be a little context because our guest today is very special. Lee Harris has become a great friend of mine. And since the last conversation, because this is going to be hopefully a series of conversations with Lee, the first time around, he blew our minds. Let's just put it that way. He blew my heart wide open. And I was so eager and so blessed to get the chance to have him back on the show. Lee, if you don't know, he channels a group of ninth dimensional beings. So just putting that out there. He channeled the first interview, and this interview, the Z's, the group that he channels, came back with even more power, with even more wisdom, that I was left speechless, and I know you will too. Also, before getting into all of that, I wanted to mention Lee. Right now, he's embarking on a whole new project that I'm supporting, that I'm also taking part in. And he's launching a business course for conscious entrepreneurs called Grow Your Business. So you might see Lee as this intuitive channel with superpowers, but Lee is also a 7-figure business owner with a team of 19 creatives and a production team behind all the work that he does. So if you're awakening to your psychic abilities and you want to build a business around this gift of yours, I suggest coming and joining us on this course. I will drop everything in the description. You will be able to sign up. You will be able to have live calls with Lee. They put together video modules. It looks like a very complete course, and I'm so excited to take part in it with you. So join that, and we'll see you on the other side. Before we start the conversation, I want you to be aware that when the Z's came out and when Lee started channeling, we hit some very sensitive issues from the education system, from sexual energy. We talked about aliens, ETs, artificial intelligence. So this is an episode that will expand your mind and hopefully expand your heart as well. If this information is a little bit too much for the logical brain, allow it to hit the intuitive brain right here in the center. And as always, the way that we spread this wisdom and this consciousness on the planet is by sharing. And if this interview resonates with you, if something hit and you really just want to spread it out to the world, make sure to share it with your friends, put it on your Instagram stories. Let's make this a wildfire of wisdom and start changing a lot of the paradigms in the earth right now. So I'm so blessed that you are here. There is a reason you came, and I hope to see you on the other side. Much love. Lee Harris, the Z's. Welcome back to the show for volume 2 of this incredible series of conversations that we've been having. Just as we started off last time, what are you most excited about right now in your life?
Wow. The future. The present's great, but I'm feeling the future a lot lately, and it feels really strong and powerful and good, which I think, given everything we're going through and everything we're, I would say oppressed by at the moment in certain ways, I'm really fascinated by this feeling of the future that I'm kind of tapping into.
I was just right before this tuning into we're recording this in May 2023, of sort of the energy update that you do every single month. And a big theme that's happening right now going forward is this inner fire, this revolutionary energy. And I feel like even in the last podcast we tuned into this energy of the warrior, the spiritual warrior. And there is this sort of like, let's start a revolution, like in consciousness. That's what we're going through. And I feel like the next generations are beginning to awaken more and more to this type of energy. How would you sort of start guiding this inner fire to make it more, let's say, impactful and last? Because the fire can wear out. How can we allow this fire of revolution energy to kindle and go forward?
I think, like many, I've had, if I go back through my life and I think of my teens, my 20s, and even certain parts of my 30s, my fire would come up in a way that was good because I was no longer suppressing it, but perhaps the results of the way it would come out of me wouldn't be as balanced as I would have liked it to be, And so I think fire is an interesting thing, because I think when you're able to own it and when you're able to work with the emotion inside yourself, it can become very effective in your life as a signal of what you need to do. For example, you read an article about something that's going on in the world, or someone tells you about something that's going on in the world, and it either angers you or upsets you. It's not going to help the situation very much for you to start moaning about that, trying to tell everyone how awful it is and get everyone to see how awful it is. But it is going to be super useful if it triggers you to go, God, the way I feel about this, I know I have to try and turn this into some positive action. So I think that's the best way that we can use our emotional signals. And I think, like many of us, I had times where I had gone so out of balance, I'd suppressed myself so much that when I was just learning to let my fire come back, I would erupt a bit too much, or I would speak to someone in my life just a bit too strongly, and then I'd notice how it affected them. And so I'd just pay attention and kind of, navigate that. So the Z's always say that the balancing of your emotions isn't necessarily a neat and tidy thing, and that it's okay that it's a bit messy sometimes, provided you know where you're trying to get to. And if you feel a revolutionary energy inside yourself right now and you're a little bit nervous about it, or you're like, oh, I don't know if I should go and talk to all my friends. Great. Just notice that. Notice you're not sure this is the energy to take out into the world. Just sit with it. Let it be in you. It's like an energy that rises, and when it first starts to come up, like a Kundalini awakening, it may not always be the best thing to take out into the world, but it's energizing and activating and opening parts of you that a week or two or a month from now, that open part of you is going to go, I am going to go and help that group, or I am going to go and say something, but in a more measured way than when my fire first rose. So far be it from me or any of us to tell each other how to behave with our emotions, because we're all so unique and we're all at different stages. But that, to me, I have learnt over the years to increasingly harness the power of my emotions rather than let the power of my emotions rush through me, rush out of me, because often that creates more mess to clean up later.
And I wanted to go sort of in this direction because this fire can start transforming even parts of ourselves. And the center of the work right now with the Z's, these conversations that you're having in the new books with Diana Edwards, they're essentially saying that there's a new breed of human that's arising right now. And I'm really interested to see from your perspective how you've began to sort of cultivate this new breed within you, because you've activated these psychic abilities within you. You've learned to manage your emotions in a different way. How does this new breed of human look like going forward?
Well, I guess, we're going to find out, and we're going to see as we all show up, because we're all going to hold different points on the star. So there's going to be the friend of yours who's brilliant at calming everyone down. There's going to be the friend of yours who's brilliant at firing everyone up. And we're all needed, and we're all going to be a little different. I would say for me, when I look at my development, hands down, the channeling and the perspective and the awareness that I've received from the Z's has been my most influential teacher. However, would it have been as integrated in me or as useful if I hadn't also gone to personal growth, personal development, what psychology offers? Like, for me, it's always been a bit of a melting pot that I like to use any aspect of wisdom that's available to us that's either very human, very biological. This is what your body needs. This is the kind of exercise you're going to need. All of those things. It's like the whole gets encompassed. So when I look back at some of the emotional and thought weight that I've been able to move through, and it's funny, I only see it when I look back and think back and go, oh, wow, God, yeah, this used to really plague me. I had a period of time in December for a couple of days where I felt a bit depressed. And what hit me was, and I knew why, it was to do with something that was going on. Someone in my life was depressed. First, I was worried about them. Then I got depressed for a couple of days. And then it shook off. It didn't last more than a day and a half. And it wasn't constant, but it reminded me I used to feel depression a lot. And I don't think that I'm immune from feeling it again in the future, or that trigger events can't come through me. But what I've noticed is, for me, the more I have lived with one eye on the spiritual and one eye on the human, but a huge eye on the meeting point, like a really big eye on the middle ground, that for me has helped me, I think, become an improved version of myself, in my relationships, in the world, in the way I can show up. What I understand from the Z's and the new human soul that we're now seeing is it's going to show up very differently in each generation. They talk about how fast young people are these days, which I can see, and I think we can all see, and that you're a lot younger than I am, but you see that speed of information and awareness and ability that young people have. And if you think about it, the world and the information highways of the world have never been as fast ever in any time that we have known in recorded history. Of course, there are whole deleted parts of our history that we know have been covered up. But as far as we know, we've never been at a time where there's such a psychic or information highway available. And the internet, of course, is a huge piece of that. And it wasn't there when I grew up. So I see the speed of information and engagement that the younger generation have now. And what the Z's have said is, what's going to be really important is the meeting point between the wisdom keepers on the planet, so people who are in their 60s, 70s, 80s, and 90s, and what they can offer to the people who are in their late teens, 20s, early 30s, who are just really, that's a period when I think you start to figure out who you are, and you also start to act in the world in a bigger way. You have a bit more autonomy. You're seen as an adult. You get to leave a mark on the world in a slightly more formed way in that period. So they've talked about how we all need each other, but that the new human soul is, at this moment in time, anyone who is becoming more conscious is having a ripple effect on the lives of those around them. And those of us who are wanting to become more conscious or becoming more conscious and holding a flame around that, we're having an effect on collective consciousness, which is the, if you like, the mainstream average hold that we have right now. And part of the job of this time is to push against and essentially, how do I put it, dismantle systems of oppression and control, which is why we're also really up against that in all ways. We as a society are seeing, oh, this group has been oppressed for centuries, and now we're really talking about that and we're seeing it. And this group have also, so there's a whole movement around equality for various groups. And of course, because there is an energy of war on the planet, there are also very targeted acts of disrupting that, weaponizing that, making people fight each other. And then even just within our leadership, the exposure of corruption and where our leadership systems, not even the individuals in power, because that kind of is a distraction, but where is the system that we are all in as humans unjust and unsustainable in the future. So it's a very edgy time to be alive, but it's actually a very necessary time to be alive and to show up. And I think the biggest illusion that we all have to wake up from, which is a painful one to wake up from, and more people are waking up from it now, is realizing the world is not quite what you thought it was. And I mean that in a good way and in a challenging way. In a good way, you're like, wow, we're in this world that this incredible energy field that's alive and that we can communicate with it. And no one really taught us that when we were kids. And equally, the system that we were told to believe in, we start to see that it's not actually in service of the betterment of humanity and this planet and sentient life. It's got a lot going on in it that is short-sighted, low consciousness, and difficult. So that's kind of a broad stroke. And then, of course, we find ourselves in it with all of our gifts and flaws and, the wounds that we are carrying ancestrally that we've grown up through, and the gifts that we came here to learn about, express, bring through. It's a melting pot of all of it.
I love how you mentioned that this energy of war, because that's something that the Z's are bringing up a lot. And they even said that many of us have parachuted to Earth at this time to raise the frequency, but we're also involved in this historic galactic war. And at what moment did you start feeling this energy of like, there's not only the war like on the physical realm, but maybe there's also an energetic war going on? Did you feel that intuitively, or is it starting to come up more now?
I think when I was younger, and this is me looking back, I didn't know this at the time, I was really good at the war against myself, which I think many people are. Many sensitive people who haven't yet figured out their sensitivity, one of the ways that we counterbalance it is to turn it against ourselves. And that's not me saying sensitive people are better than anyone else. I just mean if your sensitivity is already online, the energetics of this world are actually very challenging. And if you haven't yet figured that out, you can self-harm, self-damage, because you haven't yet understood what's going on, which it's very hard to. I would say for me, some of the, let's say, darkness within our systems, I first became aware of that around 2008, 2007. And that was hard. That was challenging. I didn't really want to see that. I'd come through the spiritual workshops and the personal development workshops that were very much focused on, okay, well, we'll just keep opening and then the world will change. And around 2007, 2008, I was like, oh, wow, there's some stuff going on that I wasn't seeing. So that's been about 15 years I've been aware of it. But I would say that something shifted. I did a London workshop in 2015 or early 2016, I think. And the Z's from the stage said 2017 to 2024 are going to be very challenging years on your planet, and you are going to see a lot rise to the surface that humanity hasn't quite seen before. What you will be seeing is evidence of everything that has been in place for thousands of years, but has been less visible to the eye. It's rising because of consciousness. And even though we say this, for many of you, you will also see these years as golden years, because even if challenging things are happening around you and you're having to support people or sometimes be impacted by what's going on, feel difficult feelings because of what you're seeing, you will come online in yourself in a way you never really have. And I know that's true for me, and I'm meeting so many people that's true for as well. It's like they say, it's the best of times, it's the worst of times. And I remember hearing that 2017 to 2024 prediction and thinking, oh, that's odd. But now I'm like,
little did you know.
No, now I'm like, oh God. And I would say for me, March of 2020, about a week before everything locked down, I got this awful feeling about what was coming. And it felt dark. And it felt like a big black storm cloud was about to come in. And at the time, we hadn't quite got to that point where the storm cloud was really obvious. But I felt very worried about how people were going to be and what we were about to walk through. And so I would say for me, like I think for many people, ever since then, things have been a bit more on. And I have appreciated the Z's talking about war because I wish they wouldn't as a human being. Like the human in me goes, we shouldn't use that word. It's a low, it's when people hear that word, I know they react a certain way. But I also know it's important because when they were explaining you're in the middle of an energetic war, it helped me start to see it more. It helped me identify it more. And it helped me understand it in a way that broadened. It stopped me buying into certain things that perhaps I would have bought into if I hadn't really just taken a step back and looked at everything. And thanks to wonderful people out there who were explaining things or showing other sides, or and even some of the things that happened that were not good, they were great confirmations of, oh, okay. So I think the Z's have been much more blunt and overt about what we're seeing and what we're going through, because if we don't see it, we can't transcend it. And I think we as a people are ready to see more and to be the revolution that's required.
How did you interpret this experience in 2019? In November, when you were at this retreat in Costa Rica, and someone in the retreat, they passed away during the event. There was a moment where you said you spoke to their soul, and they essentially did not decide to come back. They took their exit point, as we talked in the first episode. And that day, or in that week, was the last big awakening experience of your life, as you said. And that's when the Z's told you, now your work gets serious.
Yeah.
How did you interpret that now? Like, do you feel it more serious? How did that experience get interpreted by you?
Wow, that's a great question. Okay. How do I interpret? Here's the weird thing. I always took it seriously in a way. Not in a way. I always took it seriously. So when I heard that, I was like, what? But I think there were a couple of things that happened with the retreat. So we had 88 participants with us. And during a half day off, one of our participants who was swimming with his wife in the ocean had a heart attack and died. And a group of about 20 of us were down on the beach with him, trying to bring him back to life. I wasn't there. I was called to the beach. And he was so happy that morning. Like, he was so happy. And he was thrilled he was there. And the night before, he'd decided he wanted to do sound healing. And I don't know whether that meant he was going to leave his corporate job to do it or whether he was just going to start doing it. And his wife was a warrior because, my first thought after we realized he was not coming back, and after I'd had that conversation with his soul, and his soul was so happy, I'm holding onto his feet, and I'm, people are giving him CPR, and there's a group have gathered around, and they're like, we're chanting, and someone's giving him Reiki. Like, everything that was being done, what could be done, was being done, and his soul was so happy, so blissful. And his wife, my first thought is, okay, my worst fear running retreats was when we take people hiking, or when we take them on an excursion, they're going to break their ankle, or, you're always worried about the group. Even though you've got guides, you're like, God, I hope my undertone was always, I hope we finish the retreat and no one breaks their ankle.
The safety. Yeah.
Here I am like, wow, somebody died. And not only that, my first thought, once I was the last person to be with his body on the beach, and then the paramedics took him away. And as I walked up the beach, I'm just like, okay, well, we have to send everyone home. We have to stop. And I saw his wife and hugged her for a bit. And she's a warrior. And she said, I want to carry on. And of course, at first you think, okay, she's in shock. Is this really what she needs? But she was really clear. And she'd been at one of my retreats before. And so we did because of her, because she made us carry on. And I think the transformational experience we all had that week, where we had a very evidential experience of what the Z's always say, you can go at any time. It's very easy to be pulled off the earth. And his wife said the ocean was his happy place. It was where he was in the most bliss. And she said, I can't think of not that, of course, the last thing she wanted was for him to die, but she said he died surrounded by an angelic group of humans. He was with his wife. I mean, he was 62, 63, so he went too soon. But that was a game changer for me in terms of the very fragile fabric of life. And then the awakening experience, I didn't really understand it until we got to March 2020. And I think the stakes got raised for everybody. And in a way, I kind of thought, oh, all of my training the last 15 years of this work have been leading me to this moment. And so, wow. Yeah, something shifted. I think something on a, I guess, egoic or identity level just shifted for me. And it's set in motion a ton of changes in me as a person. And, straight after that, my dad had a bowel cancer operation. He died of COVID early, like a month into the whole process, in a hospital alone because no family could go in and see him. So I had a whole series of major events. There were a few other big things that all happened. So I think in a way I was I was blown open by the time we got to March 2020. And so the way I see it is the volume got cranked up for all of us in the last few years. And I know the volume isn't done, but I also witness people becoming a bit more aware, a bit more galvanized, and a little more together and connected to each other, especially after that period of enforced disconnection that we had. So it's interesting. It makes me wonder what the next few years are going to bring.
Yeah. The other day, I was having a conversation with a friend, and I got sort of this intuitive message of our hearts never break closed. They only break open. And I just heard those words and I was like, wait, that actually makes a lot of sense. Because when a heartbreak happens, and I'd love to get into how the Z's view heartbreak nowadays, but a heartbreak is something that we see as negative, or we see as like, oh, this is a bad experience. But we're actually just being expanded, as you said, open to allow more love to replace that energy that once left. That was a big insight that I had from our last conversation. And I wanted to ask you, before we get into the channeling, this is a question that I was really curious about, because you said that your relationship with the Z's is very based on free will. Like you tune into their messages when there's an open communication, but sometimes you don't ask for the message. And you said about 6 times a year you get those messages that, the Z's give you straight up, like, hey, turn this direction, go that way. What was the latest one of those messages that you can remember that you got?
Well, it's interesting. If you were to ask me that question in 3 months, I could speak about it. But I can't speak about it right now because it's not only my story to tell. And I don't mean to be cryptic. I always like to be as honest as I can.
It's marinating.
It's a major life event that is currently more in the realm of my personal life than my public life, if you know what I mean. Yeah. And it's not just me. So, but if you asked me that in 3 months, I would have an answer for you.
Yeah, we'll get you back on in 3 months. And it's interesting that they also get into the realms of the private life as well. In in the professional life, do they also lead you in directions of, oh, take on this project, do this? Is there a project that's unfolding right now for you that feels really alive that they're guiding you towards?
Well, interestingly, I could say this book series, because this book series wasn't going to be a book series. This, as far as I was concerned, this was a series of audio conversations that Diana was facilitating at my request. She had actually asked me a few years earlier, or 3 years ago, she said, would you ever let me talk to the Z's on death and dying? And do like a public thing for that, because death and dying is one of her superpowers and areas of expertise.
Wow.
And I said, sure. I said, we can do that. But I said, would you mind, before we do that, just doing some audio recordings for my Portal members community, which is now 10 years old. And every month it's the place I go deep with the Z's and the work. And, I can expand on some of the stuff that we put out online. So it was the night of the first recording. We'd done 2 recordings, and I went back to the casita where I was staying in Santa Fe, where we were recording the first ones. And I just literally heard them go, this is a book series. So that was the last time. And then they gave, and I'm like, oh, and because, and I mean with this with no disrespect, it's work to get something into book form. Like it takes a lot of time and editing, and you've got, the instancy of the audio was easy. And for me and my company, and I was like, really? And they were like, yep, there's loads of conversations. So it's often a combination of me intuitively walking myself into something. I'll get a feeling, and I'm always tracking people. So for example, if they keep giving me certain themes in the energy update, and they keep coming up in different ways over a year, I'm like, okay, I need to do a recording on this, or I need to do because this is in the air. So I tend to pay attention to what seems to be needed, but then they will intervene. And the last time they intervened was to say, this is a book series, it's ongoing, and we have so much we can say. Then that night, because they'd said that, or a few nights later, I tuned in and got like 12 book titles, and we're currently about to complete book 4.
Wow.
So even though we're just releasing book 2 now, because it takes about 9 months to get the book out, once we've released the audio to my Portal members. So that was the last big time I really remember them saying, hey, so yeah.
Yeah, no, I think these books, in my opinion, they're going to last forever, because the energy that you feel, I liked, because the Audible version came out very recently, and I got the Audible version, and I was listening to the Z's because it's a live recording.
Yeah.
And then the transcription is the book. And obviously there's a bit of editing, so it makes sense in written form, but just hearing to the Z's and hearing into Diana's questions, it's such a beautiful experience having the companionship with the book. So I really recommend people to get into that as well.
Thank you. Yeah. And it's funny, that was really important to me. So because I've produced audio my whole career, that's one of the things I retain when I work with the publishing company. And so I was adamant that rather than narrating an audiobook, they were going to be the as it happened in the room conversations. So exactly as you said. And for me, what I'm struck by, because you never really know what the purpose of something you're doing is until you hear from people. And so many people have said to me that when they listen to the recordings or read the book, their intuition wakes up and grows. And to me, that's more important than any information in there. I mean, the information's important and it can help you expand your awareness, but I feel like it's an activator of your own intuition and your own higher self. That's really what it's doing. So that's always my wish and hope. So it's lovely to hear you say that. Thank you.
Yeah. And even just hearing the vibration, the frequency that's coming through you when the Z's come through, it is helping us develop, as you said, these psychic abilities within ourselves. And with the most open heart and mind, bringing together this collective energy, we would love to open the space, if you feel ready, to ask the Z's some questions. And we have very, very interesting topics from the book as well. And then going into some future energetics that I'd love to tap into.
Good. Welcome. A pleasure to be with all of you, and with you, Emilio, the steward of this alchemic conversation. And we are just one of many conversations that you steward. And so those who listen to you regularly, they find themselves usually in one of two camps, because those two camps represent the two sides of you. Although, of course, you are multidimensional, but we are going to explain this because it is what we perceive and feel in your listeners and your group. So your two strongest aspects are the cosmic and the physically grounded. So you, Emilio, have a deep connection to understanding the physical, kinetic, grounded body and the nature of being the human animal itself. And then you are deeply connected to your cosmic origins and your cosmic intuition. So your listeners, your viewers, tend to either straddle both of those, much as you do, and are looking to integrate and balance those two aspects of being, the cosmic consciousness and the developed human being, or they find themselves in one or the other camp and slightly curious about the opposite. So, for example, you have people who listen because something about you and your way and your vibration makes their physical body, their physical human, and their mind feel very safe. So even though some of this cosmic stuff might be a little more out there to some of the listeners, although they wouldn't be here if they were fully rejecting of it, they are beginning to open their cosmic consciousness because of their trust of your ability to be a human grounded force. And likewise, there are those whose journey is to be here for the cosmic side, but they realize their body gets to ground and feel safe as they take it in with you as the steward, and not just because of you, but because of the group who gather around you. You see, every, shall we say, conductor, and you are the conductor of this orchestra, Emilio, every conductor is capable of directing and intoning a certain frequency toward a group, but they cannot do it without the participation of the orchestra and all of the orchestra playing their part and agreeing to synergize. So your group who listen to you and watch you and regularly show up, they are also, even though they may not experience this directly, feeling each other. So yes, you, the listener, or you, the viewer, are very aware of other listeners and viewers right now. And some of you might wonder, well, how is that exactly? Well, because Emilio and his guests, particularly the ones who are sensitive and open in their energy field, or beings like us who are using open energy fields to appear, we are all taking into account the listener and the viewer, meaning it is not just Emilio deciding what words will come out of his mouth or what questions. It is not just Lee or us deciding what they will say. It is a group conversation. It is just that not all of you are doing the verbal talking, but all of you are doing the verbal influencing. So that is why when you listen or you watch, you are having a direct relay experience of the audience of the conversation. So you think you're tuning in on one of your favorite podcasts or shows and having a cozy experience with those people that you are focusing on in the show or the podcast, but actually you are also resonating with the group experience of the audience. Yes, even if you are technologically tuning in. Many of you understand that this happens in a concert hall or in a sports stadium because you can all feel the bodies and you can sense everybody and you can see everybody. So you get this communal experience. But that happens energetically and psychically around what you might call pre-recorded or single focus engagement, entertainment or information. And that's what this is. It may seem like a single focus because you might be listening by yourself. But what we are explaining to you is, even though you think you are listening by yourself at the time that you want to tune in on this, you are actually connecting to all of the listeners and the group around it. So you are having a very collective experience, even if it looks like you are just focused on one or two people, or in the case of us, the group of 88 beings that we are. But then even we are not fixed. We extend into cosmic consciousness as we need to in order to impart the information or the energy frequency that is required to help bring the energy expansion that is our purpose.
What makes the human being and planet Earth so unique?
Well, we will say it is the consciousness that you are in right now. So even though parts of your history have, as Lee quite rightly said, been censored or scrubbed out, there was a time in Earth's history where the, shall we say, human animal, and we use that term not in a derogatory way at all, but just to refer to the biology and the processes that a human body goes through, was more dense. It was not as conscious as the consciousness that has since been infused into the soul of humanity. So what makes you unique is actually your consciousness, your biology to some degree, but there have been biological life forms not dissimilar in the universe before, and the biology itself is not that unique when it is seen in isolation. The electrical impulses, the nervous system, the energy fields that you each possess, they are quite unique. And at the moment, we would refer to you as hybrids, meaning you are hybrids of both density, meaning the physical form that you are in and the level of density that is the gravity belt of Earth itself, but also higher consciousness and cosmic consciousness. This generation that you are in is a return to the awareness of your cosmic origins, meaning not necessarily that you are all from another planet and you've dropped onto Earth, more instead that all planets are connected. All lifetimes are connected. It doesn't mean they all get along, and it doesn't mean every being in the universe gets along or has a positive agenda toward other beings. It is varied depending on who you are dealing with or what their intent is. But why you are unique is right now you are having this extraordinary experience of being conscious, being a soul who, in many of your cases, has gone through many lifetimes, some of which on Earth, and some incarnate in other forms, other times, other places. But right now, what makes Earth unique is its position in the universe. So Earth is, and we have said this before, and we have to be careful about this word for it can give you the wrong impression. Earth is currently an experiment in consciousness. And when we say that, some of you can get a little alarmed and think that you are in a laboratory that someone else is controlling. It doesn't quite work that way. It is not quite that disempowered. But Earth is an experiment in consciousness because Earth is going through an enormous transformation, not just physically, but also energetically. And so that is why over the next 300 years, the future of Earth is going to potentially be quite extraordinary. And Earth has the ability to, shall we say, not only regenerate in ways that some people on your planet right now would say you cannot, it's too late. We would argue that point over and over again. Some of those people who are saying that, by the way, want you to think that so that you get very scared. And we are not denying that there are not shifts on Earth that need to be paid attention to. But until you, the people, have a bit more say in what happens on Earth, that isn't going to happen. And that's one of the lessons of your time. It is not necessarily that you, the people, are, shall we say, messing up the Earth, as you are so often told. Why is it that the systems who are supposedly given leadership power are allowing that to happen? That is the question. And at what point do people on Earth get to re-influence what happens on Earth so that you, the consciousness of you as a people, can move Earth forward into a new era? And that is the precipice point you are standing on right now. We will tell you that when we say precipice point, many of you think, good, in 2 or 3 years, everything is going to change. And we say, no, this is a long timeline. The shift you are looking to happen, it may play out over the next 30, 40, or even 50 years, which to some of you sounds like an excruciatingly long time, but that is because you hear something like that and you think, well, that means it's going to be exactly like it is today until then. And we say, no, no, no. Observe Earth's history so far. Things are quite slow on Earth, and yet at the same time they are also fast. It is not that long ago, not that many decades ago, that whole groups on your planet had less rights than they have now. So even though many of you would argue that right now rights are being taken away, and we don't dispute that in some areas, or at least being attempted to be taken away, we would like you to look at your history, your very recent history, just this last 100 years, and see quite how extraordinary the changes have been. So the coming changes are not necessarily technological in nature, or they shouldn't be in a dominant way. And that is a big question of your time. How much will humanity let themselves be replaced by technology? And we will say they will not, even if there is an attempt to do that right now. The question of your time, though, is how will consciousness begin to permeate on the planet as a result of many of your technological advances, which is why we say there is no such saying as technology is bad. That is a blanket statement. We will say you would not be at the level of consciousness you're at now if certain technologies had not been developed, employed, and distributed. However, as with anything, there are, you might call them shadow sides, areas that need to be cleaned up, modified, improved. So when we talk about the war of consciousness that you have heard us refer to a lot, we mean that very much. There is a push-pull between a small group who would like you to go a certain way on the planet and an increasingly awakening larger group who are beginning to see that that way would not be good for any of you. And so that is why we say the next 30, 40, 50 years, because many of you want to see the transformation. And if you look at Earth's history, yes, it is quite a change in the last 100 years, but progress doesn't tend to happen on Earth within a 2 to 3 year span. It tends to play out over a 2 to 3 decade span historically. Now, you are at a time where everything is faster, yes, but it is also important that the changes are not so dramatic that you destabilize much of the, shall we say, good energy that some of you are beginning to land in. So when we talk about the energetics of the new human soul, it is no different to the birth and early life of a child. You do not have a child fall onto the earth and encourage it to start running when it is 3 days old. First, it has to learn to feel and perceive and sense its environment in a physical way. Then it may start to crawl. Then it may start to walk very slowly, very wobbly. So you see, that is why we would caution any of you about getting too attached to a time. And usually when you are very desperate for a positive transformation, it means you are trying to outrun what you are in. And we understand that. And we understand there are many of you who feel very alarmed about what you see in the world, but we would always encourage you, if you are only alarmed at what you see in the world, you are not paying enough attention to the world at large. You are focusing in on certain areas that perhaps you are even being encouraged to focus on. You are missing the bigger picture. Spirit is alive, consciousness is alive, love is alive. Focus on those things as well as those areas you may be working on behalf of the improvement of, and you will have a more balanced life. You will have more conscious ideas around how to be the revolution, and you will also be balancing yourself, this new human soul that you are becoming. You are not here to be enslaved to suffering, just as you are not here to allow the enslavement of humanity to continue.
I would love to touch on this topic of the massive hive mind. And you talked a little bit about this development of technology that we're undergoing, and something that has been really coming up to the surface is this artificial intelligence, ChatGPT, which from the last time we talked, it was just beginning, and now it's taking on a whole shape and form. From your vantage point, how are you viewing this technology? What would you advise humanity with regards to this?
Well, there are many things that have been said about this already, which is important for all of you to study the different voices, study the different ideas. But we will say this, from our perspective, This AI technology that you are referring to is going to be helpful. And let us explain what we mean by that. For we do not simply mean it is a helpful service. We mean that some of the risks and some of the, shall we say, discordant things that will happen with the rise of AI on the planet are actually going to be some of the warning signs that humans need. Meaning, the proliferation of AI devices, technologies, and, shall we say, apparitions on the planet are going to cause a little bit of, we will say, disruption, and in some cases, and in localized areas, destruction. And it usually takes humans to see something very clearly spelled out before they act. They are not so good at being warned about something because that is all hypothetical. Just as you cannot tell somebody to be spiritual. Unless they experience some level of spirituality or connection in themselves, you are just speaking words to them. But when they have a negative experience or they see negative impacts, then they will change the direction of the ship. So, we fully stand behind the idea that the question humanity is currently facing is, will you allow yourselves to be replaced by AI? Or can AI be a part of your lives and be a part of the way you work on the planet? Because there are those who wouldn't mind the replacement of aspects of humanity because they will not suffer any consequences from AI taking over. But many humans will. And it will take a few clear examples of that beginning to happen and taking place for people to rise up. We won't say against it, but for the modification and regulation of it. So, in short, the heat is going to need to be turned up on some of the problems with this technology before enough humans wake up to see the problematic nature it could potentially have, and enough of an agreement happens collectively to, shall we say, slow down the willful development of it. And again, that is coming from just a small number who do not stand to lose anything the way that the mass of humanity will. And so, again, it exposes the war. And if you look for the people who are pushing for these kinds of things, it is wonderful information for you. At best, you can see them as reckless and ill-informed. At worst, you can see them as very deliberately driving you down a road that they will benefit from, but you will not.
What is needed for a future where the majority of human consciousness has this galactic awareness, contact, and merging with other intergalactic species and races? Do you see a future where humanity, or has there already been a future where humanity has been also in contact with this intergalactic community?
Well, there is a past and a present where that is true, but there are a couple of future timelines, and this is part of the, shall we say, problem for the human mind. Number one, a very good job has been done in scaring people from the idea of other. And when you use the term alien with other, and you do not give the human sovereignty over their own mind enough that they realize they too are alien to somebody on the planet, then they get into this warlike mentality. I must defend myself against this other thing. So if you sow enough of that into the energy template of humanity, you are going to get resistance to the notion of this idea. Now, to be fair, most human beings right now do not have the bandwidth to even consider that idea because they are being held in many ways down in a system that does not necessarily give them time, room, space, or perhaps we would say enough comfort in their lives to be able to look at those kinds of things. So it's far easier for them to follow the narrative that has been handed to them, which is anyone talking about that is crazy, is a very popular term. So Will that be possible in future decades? We see it as a certainty. How soon you get there is going to depend on mass consciousness, but this is the bigger piece of information we want to give you. Once somebody becomes more connected to themselves in spirit, less animalistic in their training, less caught up in survival issues, which they have been put into, by the way. It's not their fault much of the time. They have been put into systems and economic systems and safety systems that do not necessarily help them feel expanded. Again, we used the word slavery earlier, and we do not mean that to be too heavy, but there is a level of that when it comes to how expanded you are as beings. And it doesn't mean you cannot rise up the ladder. For many of you can, and you do find a way, but some of you, rising up that ladder is very hard. The odds are a bit more stacked against you systemically. So it doesn't mean you can't, but you do also need to be honest with yourselves, those of you who feel very proud of how you've created your reality. Ask yourself, well, was it easier for me to create my reality in the reality I was born into versus this other person who was born into a different reality? We are not trying to in any way say that the other person can't, but it is a harder hill to climb. And why we are bringing this up is because if you were able to connect everyone to their spiritual nature, if everyone was able to feel and perceive energy in the way that all of you are built to, and the way that many of you do, especially if you are tuned in on this, it's possibly quite normal, quite every day for you to do that, or perhaps it's a new thing that you are getting used to. You can feel the energy in nature. You can see and perceive the energy between you and another being. You can sense an energy field of a person, not just look at their face, their hair, what they're wearing. You realize they are an energy, they are alive. All of you are energy. Once you agree to recognize you are energy, things such as galactic, alien, other species becomes a lot less foreign to you. Because all of a sudden, even if it's not your passion or your interest, you can see the possibility. You can see it's logical. Ah, yes, well, we are this energy field, this electrical system. Why would we think that we're the only ones? But if you haven't even been allowed to tap into that yet, you've neither given yourself that permission, or your life has not given you the freedom, space, or the education or the support to do it, then this idea of galactic and alien becomes very far-fetched to you, and perhaps quite scary, and perhaps quite foreign to the part of you that is just trying to keep yourself held together within the, shall we say, straitjacket that you are trying to keep alive and work within. So, as more people wake up to see that the world isn't quite what they thought it was, and that the system they thought they were trying to move up perhaps is a flawed system in and of itself, and it itself needs to change. That is why so many who move up the system, whether that is economically or a certain level of success, and we don't necessarily mean status success, perhaps they become successful because they have a family they love, or they have a very simple life, but they love their life. Anyone who reaches that level of, shall we say, the ability to feel joy or peace, they turn around and look at the system of the world and they see how it was not created with that in mind. So anyone who moves up the ladder suddenly looks back at the system that they were able to find their way up through and questions it. It's why many who are, shall we say, and we would say the biggest criticism comes from wealthy people here. There are many people who have wealth in the world or success who turn around and try and tell everyone else, oh, that is not the end. That is not actually the goal. And understandably, because jealousy, envy, and competition have been woven into your humanity system, it is very popular to attack the wealthy person. Oh, well, it's okay for them to say that because they've got loads of money. You're not hearing them. What they're telling you is loads of money solved their problems for maybe a few weeks, and it certainly gives them a more comfortable life in the system. They are not arguing that. But what they are saying is, ooh, this is not the top of the ladder. We've all been sold a bill of goods. And that's why many of them become activists to try and work from inside the system. But anyone low down the ladder does not usually have the bandwidth, the time, or the freedom to do that. So, back to your original question. The idea of galactic consciousness, the idea of other beings, other planets, That is a luxury for some, that they are able to connect to it. That is an inconvenience or a fear for others. But all souls who bring their soul online, who basically recognize they are a soul, they are an energy system, who start to see the miraculous nature of this life. Even if your life is difficult right now, you can acknowledge it's pretty extraordinary that you are alive and that you are essentially on this holodeck where you are the star of your story. And you are going to be the one main character you will follow from birth to death. You'll be there at your birth, you'll be there at your death. That is pretty extraordinary, but so rarely are you asked to see that or contemplate that. And when you start to contemplate how extraordinary that is, what you were previously told as being extraordinary, cosmic conversations, galactic beings, other universes, it's not so extraordinary. It seems somewhat logical, even if it's not your field of interest. You are open to it. We hope that makes sense.
It does. It does. And I felt pertinent to talk about our spiritual brain, our heart. And you said that for any action that is being taken on the planet right now that does not include at least 30 to 40% of heart energy in it is going to be dragged backwards very quickly. So I'd love to describe this spiritual brain of ours, how you've seen it, and how we can envelop the planet with more heart energy.
Well, when we refer to the spiritual brain or the spiritual heart, we are speaking about collective brain, collective heart. So it is a brain that is beyond you and your energy field and your body. It is a heart that is beyond you and your energy field and your body. It is collective and connected. That is your greatest power. Alone, you are only going to get so far. So, why we refer to 30% plus of heart energy at the moment is up until as recently as what you know as the 1980s, the range of heart energy on the planet was approximately 10 to 20% of its capacity. Now, there may have been, shall we say, incredible heart experiences you had in your life. Perhaps it was the birth of a child and the heart energy went to a 50 for you for a few days. Perhaps it's a movie that you saw that was full of heart that brought your heart online up to a 40. So you'd have these experiences where you could rise above the, shall we say, common level of 10 to 20. And that would continue to increase what was going on. But since the 80s onwards, there has been an incremental rise. And now we would say the level of heart is sitting collectively at approximately 22 to 25%. You might say, well, that does not sound very incremental if you were saying it was at 20, 30 to 40 years ago. But remember, things are slow for the human. Not for spirit, not for the soul, but there is a certain level at which the human has been held when it comes to speed of evolution. That is changing. That is why the next generation is so much faster in comparison to the generations who came before. But don't get too big-headed about that younger generation. You couldn't be that if it wasn't for generations that came before you. So this is why any of you who get lost in generation judgment, you should drop it. If you're an older person annoyed at the younger generation, you birthed them. And if you're a younger person annoyed at the older generation, they birthed you. Don't disconnect. That's illogical. You are all connected and you've all paved the way for each other. But the reason we bring this up is 22% to 25% is the average at this moment in time of mainstream heart consciousness. So it has moved quite a bit. Now, there are those of you who are operating in the 30 to 40 range already, which means anything that you do that doesn't contain at least 30% of heart consciousness. It doesn't mean you are all heart about it, but it means that you are not pushing things forward because of your mind or your ambition or your desire to get something for yourself. 30 to 40% of your heart is in it for service, connection, the good of the whole, as much as your own agendas. Provided 30 to 40% of heart energy is in it, those will be the successful actions, creations, relationships. Anything less than that, you are going to get dragged through some lessons so that your heart wakes up. And usually the lessons involve pain, wounding, and being poked in parts of your body that are still a bit wounded, that haven't yet come back as pure energy so that your heart can use the pure energy of your whole body to really grow and illuminate you from within and emanate that out into the world. So that's why we say heart consciousness is the currency of the future. It's the value of the future. However, if we look at the last century, 1900 to the year 2000, up until we would say the 80s, the mind was the dominant currency. And so now you are moving down into the heart. And when you have illuminated the heart at this level, you will start to go down to the root chakra, which is where a lot of the war, a lot of the separation, a lot of the division can live. So that is why we say that the energy of war is going to fade out on this planet. The energy of war cannot be sustained in the coming few hundred years. It simply can't. That's not where the Earth is going. So even though many of you are frustrated about the war you already see and wish it was gone tomorrow, the heart will be illuminated first. And it takes the awareness of a heart to recognize the shadow, the death, and the pointlessness of war.
How does sexual energy complement our heart energy?
Well, sexual energy is a place where you could imagine a bonfire that can heat the heart. In fact, we should say that sexual energy, which can be felt throughout the whole body, there are some who do not necessarily have a strong sexual energy in their root chakra. Many of them may feel it more in their fingertips. Often artists or those who create with their hands, they may not have a strong connection to human sexuality, but they run a lot of what you would call sexual energy, but it doesn't mean it's used only for the act of sex, through their hands and through their eyes and through other parts of their body. But sexual energy for most of you is a flame between your hips. That is where the strongest, shall we say, propulsion for it comes. It doesn't mean that the sexual energy doesn't move through your whole body. That is the design. You are to be illuminated and lit up from within. Imagine someone lighting 1,000 candles inside your body and you feeling the loving, gentle warmth of those candles, and it looks like an illuminated cathedral in there. That is the high of sexual energy. Now, unfortunately, there are many who don't know how to open their heart, who have relegated sexual energy to the root chakra. People who think that sex is, you would say, getting yourself off with someone else's body, which is such a tragedy to us because that misses the point. Shared pleasure, shared connection, offered back and forth is extraordinary. It is an incredibly unifying and healing act between two human beings, or in many cases, more than two human beings at a time. So it is not to say it is the only way to heal, but it's interesting for all of you to notice how sex, one of your most powerful and sacred acts on earth, it is how most of you arrived here on earth, how you were conceived, has been weaponized, and also a power game has been woven through it. And this is historic, by the way. This is not new. But notice the distortion that will be placed upon your sexual energies. Rather than sexual energy being about pleasure, celebration, and upliftment of each other, it is often seen as a power game, a conquest, a one-sided act. It is, like many things on Earth right now, a diseased area. So if you are a pioneer of sexual energy on Earth, for example, you are here to be an advocate for the healing or tantric side of it, or perhaps you are the person in your group who speaks about sex in a very open way, in a celebratory way, not necessarily in a way to shock others, but just to have free conversation about it, while your friends who have never heard you talk about it before are sitting around the table in horror because shame has made them think they're not allowed to talk about sex or it shouldn't be discussed. We would say, look at the animals. They don't give it a second thought. For them, it is procreation. And for them, it is as simple as, now I'm eating, now I'm having sex, now I'm doing something else. It is just part of the fabric of their life. And for so many of you, a veil has been wrapped around it. It has been overly turned into tantalization, and also in a way separated from you through shame. So many of you were taught sexual shame from an early age, and that is its own kind of tragedy when it comes to your sexual energy being a part of your spiritual life force.
In the recent book that you put out, book 2, you mentioned Dolores Cannon, and I read one of her books very recently, and she was mentioning in her sessions that in Atlantis, in other civilizations, they would train and develop the children's telepathic and third eye vision from a very early age. How do you radically shift the education system to begin to start teaching children to open up these psychic abilities so we can become a more evolved species in many ways?
Well, there are a few schooling systems on Earth that have tried to do this for children. Even in the last few decades, there are certain schools and ways of being. They are very small. They are not at all in the majority, where the sensory nature of the being, the child, is retained. And anything that will help enhance the child's connection to their sensory ways of being is celebrated. Again, there aren't many areas of education that do this. What you will notice is the education system still celebrates the mind. It's why it's going to be very difficult for the people going through the education system now who will come out the other side and wonder why they don't have a job after they have gone through this 3 or 4 years of training. Not necessarily because they won't learn skills or have a good experience, but because until the sensory and the heart are included in your education systems, they are not education systems of the future. That is not where you're going. So we would say that if you are a parent, or perhaps you are a teacher or a tutor, or you're an uncle or an aunt or a loving friend to your friend's child, anything you can do that can help the child remain alive to their sensory self is good. Whether it's having a little chat about angels, not to hoist your opinion onto the child, but to ask them questions about what they feel, what they perceive, to try and understand their way, because you're all different. You will have certain children who are very intuitive in a way of hearing. They are auditorily sensitive. They are auditorily intuitive. Then you will have those who do not have that at all. So if you talk to them about angels and hearing angels, they won't know what you're talking about. But they are very angelically alive in their physical expression. Perhaps they are very gifted with dance, and when they dance, they connect to their angelic energy. So it is all about keeping alive their connection to their energy, and this is going to show up with different children in different ways. But any education system that is trying to teach, shall we say, facts that have been approved, or we will say disapproved by others, needs to be checked. For example, look at this current banning of your books that is happening in your education systems. You need to be very mindful of that. Why are they trying to do that? What are they removing? What are they afraid of? So it is very interesting, this time that you are in, for we propose that over the next 20 to 30 years, as you are already seeing, more people are seeing the benefit of homeschooling, but at the same time, that is not suitable for every parent, because that is a certain amount of time and effort and energy required. But we do see that more of what we would call localized schooling is going to take place in the coming decades. But again, in order for that to happen, there needs to be this slight revolution in the current system. But remember, a revolution is not just about taking to the streets and shouting against what already exists. For many of you, your revolution will be building what you think needs to exist. And then when more people start to experience that, then the revolution naturally occurs. It's not always about knocking down the house because you think it's bad for you before you've built another one. Sometimes, remember, humans need to see and experience to believe. So if you start building beautiful houses in the neighborhood that they start seeing, they will go, this looks good. And then they'll look back at the one that was built for them by the system and they'll go, interesting. So sometimes they need to see the alternative, and many of you are here to build the alternative. So for some of you, that will be the education of children. And remember, the education of children is not just you being a teacher. It might be you having a chat with a fellow parent, or someone who is a parent when you aren't a parent, who's struggling with why their child is a bit disconnected, and you're able to point out to them, well, what are they doing to express themselves? Do they like art? Do they like writing? Do they need to run? Do they need to be physical? It is all about your expression. Your connection to your expression spiritually and energetically is vital. The minute that starts shutting down, many of you disconnect from yourselves. So making sure that each child has some areas of expression that are innate to them, that are nurtured and kept alive during childhood is key.
This has been beautiful, Z's. We have one very last question that we asked Lee in our first conversation. We call this the time capsule question that we ask every guest on the show. And this question requires us to travel out a bit into the future, which I know is very easy for you.
Ha!
But if you were given a time capsule and the next generation of leaders were to come across this time capsule in 30 years, and they were to open this time capsule, and within it, you could place in anything from your wildest dreams that will allow the next generation of leaders to be equipped with the tools and the guidance necessary to usher in this new earth that is happening right now in the earth. What would you include in this time capsule? And on the top of the time capsule, you can leave a question for these leaders.
The question we would leave is, are you ready to go to the next level? ? And then inside the time capsule, we would have created a energetic egg that is larger than a human, so about 8 feet in height and about 4 feet wide. And each person would be invited, when they open the time capsule, to walk inside this egg. And this egg would show them how love feels. And they would stay in this egg for a few minutes, and their whole body would be illuminated into how love feels. So they get it. So they experience it. They have a visceral, vibrational barometer in their body now of how love feels. And then when they come out of that egg and go about their business in the world, they will know, after feeling and experiencing that in their whole body, that that's what they're here to seed, and that anything else is subpar. And so when they encounter it in the world, they will, if it's their area, do what they can to bring more of an energy of love into that system, that group, that area. Or they will know to avoid certain places and go where they can build an energy to help others come to know how love feels.
That's a mic drop. Ziz, thank you so much.
A pleasure and honor, in peace and in love to you and all of your galactic cosmic warriors. For you are all galactic and cosmic, and the sooner everyone gets over that and doesn't even pay it that much attention, the quicker you begin to understand this incredible ride that you are having as human beings. Even with the challenges, even with some of the sadnesses or the suffering, and we understand all of that. We are not trying to whitewash any of that. But even with that, it's an extraordinary thing to be alive on Earth. And as you yourself said, Emilio, you parachuted in for this time. You parachuted in so that you could remember and galvanize how love feels for yourself, and then distribute and share that with as many others as you can. Good. In peace and in love to all.
Much love. Welcome back. That was beautifully. How did that feel?
It was good. I get to hear everything, and I don't normally remember much, but that time capsule, I'm like, oh,
wow,
that makes so much sense.
We did that the first time, and you mentioned the sound healing and the frequency of music.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I'm good friends with Wendy Kennedy, who's a wonderful channeler. I don't know if you know her. I should connect you to, because you'd love talking to her. And her guides, she channels the Pleiadians, and she also channels light language. And her guides are always saying, I was reminded of this the other day by someone who was listening to her. Her guides are always saying that sound is one of, if not the most powerful healing force we have on the planet right now. And I thought that's interesting because, this connects to the time capsule, because when we listen to a sound or a music that we want to open to that suits us, our body does open. It is like we immerse ourselves in that frequency. So it is like putting on a blanket. So I guess in a way that may be why it just came to me too. So
Yeah.
interesting that sound healing was my human idea of what the Z's just said. Maybe a few rungs up the ladder.
That's so beautiful. And yeah, I know we went a little over on the time with the Z's. But I wanted to just ask you final questions to wrap up and end with a powerful frequency. I wanted to ask you because you said that in the future, or I think that the Z said this, that there's going to be more appointed peace ambassadors. And I wanted to ask you, if you were appointed one of the first peace ambassadors in the world, what would be the first thing that you would do?
Wow. Gosh.
Sounds like an election out here, like a presidential.
That's a huge question, isn't it? What would be the first thing I would do? Well, I guess if I had earned and graduated into that honor, that would be a whole other moment than right now. Like if it happened to me right now, I would immediately study some of our greatest peace ambassadors of our time. I would try and digest, okay, what are their greatest teachings? What were some of the lessons? I would try and immerse myself in that frequency more than ever before, so that in order to be an ambassador of it, I was as full of it as I could possibly be. But I'm also under no illusion that, the peace ambassadors of our time, they had their human challenges and ups and downs. It's not that they were just living peace. I think probably what I would have to start doing is I would have to start speaking to the insanity of war. I would start trying to wake people up to the fact, because we weren't taught to question war. We're taught that it just happens. Why does it happen? Who's making it happen? Who does it suit that it happens? Because it certainly doesn't suit any of us. So I would have to start, I love what Russell Brand is doing right now with brilliantly breaking down things that haven't been questioned so that people perhaps see them in a new way. I guess I would have to start getting data on war and start putting it together in very simple to understand videos or information as quickly as I could before whoever wants to keep war going decides to take me out. But I think I'd be able to get a bunch done before that happened, if that happened. And who cares? At the end of the day, are we here for higher consciousness, or are we here to try and hold on to our life? So I guess that would be what I would say.
Yeah. And who are a couple of those names of peacekeepers that you would look up to and study, just to have a reference?
I guess I immediately go to people like Thich Nhat Hanh and, some of the people who, and for me, it's the vibration of peace. They may have been a teacher of Buddhism or a teacher of this or that, but for me, it would be, I'm trying to think, who else would I think we have them today. I think I would really look at people who were able to continually bring a message of light and love without being inflammatory, attacking, or degrading of others. Which is, as I say that, I'm like, if you haven't yet figured out how low vibration politics is, just look at how those last few words I used has become the modern day politics. Which is why I'm impressed with people, even though I know the system is very corrupt. I'm impressed with the people who are trying to go in there and change it from the inside. And we need those people to do that. But we also need people to kind of wake up and question. And I'm not saying people need to wake up who are outside of me. I needed to wake up. And we need more of us to be able to be held in that sometimes difficult wake-up call, because it's not easy to realize that your parents aren't quite as loving or benevolent as they've told you they are, which I think is one of the things you go through when you're like, oh my God, I had never questioned things at the top the way I do now.
Yeah. And this question that the Z's left, which was, are you ready to level up? I wanted to ask you, how do you level up in your life?
It's interesting because sometimes I'm really conscious about it. Like I really leveled up from about 2018 onwards when I made a commitment to, in my case, fitness. And it was interesting. I started to recognize that I needed a certain level of stamina and I needed a certain level of grounding in my body. And so I committed to training 5 or 6 days a week. And I've kept that up for 5 years. And everything changed. And also as I started to hold more in my work, and have to learn more in my work to hold more, I started getting up at 6 or 6:30 and going to bed at like 9:30, but it all happened very naturally. So there are certain conscious ways that I have changed patterns or improved areas of my life to better support, what I feel is my purpose here as both someone who puts work into the world and just a human being in relationships with my family, my friends, all of that. But honestly, now it's surrendering to the next level because I feel like I'm at a point where I've laid a lot of ground and done a lot of conscious work. And if I tap into my next year or two, it's like, can you surrender to the speed at which this next level wants to come in? And that's the question I have to kind of remember. And the answer will always be yes, but my mind will sometimes go, oh, or my energy field will go, oh, hang on, and I've got better at navigating those moments in myself. But yeah, I would say surrender is going to be my focus for the next couple of years because I feel like things are already in place. But I think that's because I've got myself, consciously to this position. So yeah, surrender is going to be my biggest teacher the next 2 to 3 years, I can feel.
Yeah. In the beginning stage of your career, did you feel like you were driving more of like using more of that masculine energy? And now you're in a stage of just more surrendering, letting things flow?
Weirdly, I feel like my healthy masculine is better than it's ever been now. I think back then I was very, very dedicated to serving my people. So if someone came, I did readings for 15 years. I could completely focus on serving that. I was a little more shy and self-doubting around everything else. I don't have that self-doubt anymore. Like it's taken me time to, like, I understand how the whole thing fits together, including me keeping my eye on the mechanism through which my work and the work of others that I have constructed with a great team needs to stay healthy and needs to stay vital. Whereas back then I was probably really good at the service of the people I was serving through my work, and I was much weaker at being able to hold what it takes to hold it behind the scenes so that the entity that is the company is healthy for me, for the people who work with me, and then for all of the people that we're serving. It's like there's a much more holistic relationship in me now. It used to be a bit more compartmentalized in me and a bit shy and a bit, I don't know, and I don't know. I don't have that anymore, and that's a relief, actually.
Brother, I love talking to you, man.
I love talking to you too, even though I do a lot of talking.
6 months after, is there anything that you would want to add into your time capsule at all?
Ooh, okay. Well, firstly, I want that egg that they're putting in.
I just love it. Give me one of those eggs. How much does that cost?
I mean, because you can cultivate those. I recognize those experiences, and I've had those awakening experiences. But yeah, imagine if you just had an egg that could literally, and I'm sure that will exist in the future. Oh God, gratitude. That's not very helpful for other people, but I think I would put in, just on a personal level, in the time capsule, if it was for me to find in the future, in this moment in life, I have a lot of gratitude for a lot of different things at a level I previously probably haven't been able to let myself feel. But no, I might just put these books in. Yeah, if they're still needed in 30 or 40 years, we'll see.
They will be. If you want to show us the first copy of book 2.
I just got this before yesterday. I saw the first copy.
So everyone can get it now. Conversations with the Z's, book 2, Awaken Your Multi-Dimensional Soul. Highly recommend it, brother. Anything else? Where can people find you? Any other project events that you have going on?
Yeah, so leeharrisenergy.com is where you can find all my work. I have Lee Harris Energy YouTube channel where I put out my free monthly energy updates and various other free videos. We create music too. And you can find that at the same website, or leeharrismusic.com. And we'll be doing a retreat in June, an online retreat called Soul Magic.
I saw that.
It's called Becoming the New Human Soul. And it's a series of conversations from the Z's accompanied by live music from Devor Bozique, who I've worked with for years in the workshop room, but we've never before filmed the two of us together in the same room, him channeling the music while I'm channeling the message. So we're really excited about that. That was June the 12th, 13th or 14th. I can't remember the date. Sorry.
Wow. Amazing. No, we'll link all of that in the show notes so people can check it out. And Lee, it's always been such a pleasure. You inspire me a lot, and I know that we're going to continue co-creating together, and I would love that. And hopefully see you very soon in person out in LA.
That would be great. Yeah, hopefully that would be great. So yeah, thank you so much for having me, to you and to all your tribe. It's always such a pleasure to come and be with all of you, not just you. So thank you.
Always welcome, brother. Thank you.